Hi everybody, Melissa Best here again. We're going to do our first presentation on anatomy and physiology of the endocrine system. And this is my name, March 12th, 2023, Anatomy and Physiology 2 of the endocrine system. So I drew fun little pictures for you all. First, we will start with the pituitary gland. So basically the pituitary gland is also known as our master gland. It is very small. It's a pea-shaped organ and a pea-sized organ. So it's tiny. It monitors and regulates many bodily functions through the hormones that it produces, which is also known as growth and sexual reproductive development and function within our body. It's at the base of the brain behind the bridge of the nose. So let's just imagine that this is our facial region right here. Bridge of the nose is going to be right here, aligned with our pituitary gland, and then the hypothalamus above here. It's about 1.5 inch in diameter. The pituitary gland rests within a hollowed out area of the sphenoid bone, so throughout here, also called as the sella turgida. It is attached to the hypothalamus here. It is inferior to the hypothalamus, so below it, and it is connected by the infundibulum. Made up of two distinct regions known as, and let me get my other picture here, known as the anterior lobe and posterior lobe. So here is the anterior lobe, and here is the posterior lobe. Posterior and anterior. I always get these mixed up. So this is the posterior. This is the anterior. Right here with the red veins is arterial blood. Down below here is going to be our venous drainage. And in between here, between the arterial blood and venous drainage, so it's going to be our pars intermedia. And then number 4 here, you'll see with the fun little like exploding flowers. That's what they look like. The neurosecretory cells. And so the anterior pituitary gland, posterior, anterior. I always get that confused. It secretes majority of the hormones, which are under the regulation of the hypothalamus. So the 6 cell lines that are within are hormone-producing cells that are the somatotrophs, lactotrophs, corticotrophs, thyrotrophs, and the gonadotrophs. The anterior pituitary gland also encompasses the following structures known as the pars distalis. This is located at the distal part of the gland. Acidophils, they are composed of polypeptide hormones. They usually stain red or orange in color. Basophils, they are composed of glycoprotein hormones, and they usually stain purple or blue in the cytoplasm. And the chromophobes, they don't stain. Pars tuberalis, the tubular stalk is divided into pars tuberalis anteriorly and posteriorly. Pars intermedia, this is between the pars distalis and posterior of our pituitary gland. The main function of the anterior pituitary gland would be our adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. It's the release of the hormone from the gland. It's responsible for the corticotropin release of the hormone, CRH, from the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland intermediately help each other out. They also produce, anterior pituitary gland produces prolactin. This is the hormone under the direct control of the hypothalamus as well. It produces dopamine and inhibits the release of prolactin. It also produces a growth hormone or somatotropin. the GH, also known as GH, growth hormone, and gets secreted from the somatotrophs in response to the growth hormone releasing hormone of the hypothalamus. So it also controls of the thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. It is secreted from the gland of the thyrotrophs, occurs in response to the thyrotropin release hormone from our, again, hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, seriously, and the pituitary gland work together nonstop every day for us. Posterior pituitary gland is the portion of the gland that specializes in the neuroendocrine structure. The posterior pituitary is a combination of the pars nervosa and the infundibular stalk. Its main function is to produce two hormones that are very important. Oxytocin, they participate in milk letdown and milk ejection from reflex during lactation, myoepithelial and smooth muscle contraction, and our uterine contraction. So very important. Arginine vasopressin, or the antidiuretic hormone, ADH or AVP. These hormones aid in regulation of water content and prevents water depletion. It maintains the tonicity of the blood and the blood pressure during an event of a mass volume loss of water and blood. That is pituitary gland. And now I want to move on to our thyroid. One picture. Right here is a picture of a human, obviously, but the thyroid gland. So here you'll see the thyroid cartilage highlighted in pink or peachy color, or sometimes known as salmon, is the thyroid gland itself. And then right here is the trachea. So our thyroid is very small and it's butterfly shaped, as much as I try to get it shaped like a butterfly as possible. It's located in front of our neck, under our skin, obviously. It's posterior to the sternothyroid and sternohyoid muscles, wrapping around the cricoid cartilage and trachea rings. It's located inferior to the laryngeal thyroid cartilage and is typically corresponding to the vertebral levels of C5 through T1. So just like C5, or C spine starts about here, down, C5 to T1, right through, my hair, here in this area generally. It controls many of our body's important functions by producing and releasing, or known as secreting, many hormones within our body to help regulate a lot of our metabolism. So, and it also sits below our voice box. It's 2 inches and consists of 2 different lobes, the right lobe and the left lobe. I have a picture here for us. Right lobe, left lobe. In between here is going to be our isthmus. 80% of it is thyroxine, which is also known as T4, 20% of triiodothyronine, T3, and the calcitonin, T3, as well. T3 and T4 increase our metabolic rate. So both lobes and all 3 different levels, T4, T3, all 2 levels work interchangeably to really regulate our metabolism in our bodies. The parafollicular cells secrete the hormone calcitonin, and its minor role is in regulating and monitoring our calcium intake throughout the body. It regulates our metabolism mostly, is what we're known for. So the hormone, it helps function the body that it secretes, depends on how our body makes heat, consumes oxygen, and uses the energy that we put into our bodies, and how it's effectively used as well. So basically, nearly every tissue in our body is regulated by the thyroid gland, or the thyroid hormone. It controls the brain, the nerve development, functions in our nails, skin, hair, our eyes, our heart, and even our bowel movements, our intestine functions. So the thyroid is controlled by the pituitary gland, and as we know, that sits at the base of the brain. So the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, and the hypothalamus all interchangeably work consistently together to really help regulate our thyroid. So when there is a thyroid disorder, usually that occurs from either our thyroid making too much of something or too much of a hormone, or it can be a disorder from a result of making too little of a hormone. So that's how we can tell. Moving on to our adrenal glands right here. Adrenal glands are also known as our suprarenal glands. They're very small in a triangular shape located at the top of our kidneys. So we have our left kidney, right kidney. We have the right adrenal gland and the left adrenal gland. I try to highlight it for you where we can see the adrenal glands as much as possible. So these produce hormones that help regulate our metabolism and our immune system, our blood pressure, and how we respond to stress and other daily occurrences. The outer part of each gland is the adrenal cortex, and the inner part is the adrenal medulla. I have a picture here. I gotta find it. Here we go. So we have the adrenal cortex and then the adrenal medulla. The right adrenal gland sits just below the liver, posterior to the, get my picture back here for you. The right adrenal gland sits just below the liver, posterior to the inferior vena cava and anterior to our diaphragm. The left adrenal gland sits medially to the spleen, superior to the splenic artery and vein, lateral to the abdominal aorta, and anterior to our diaphragm. The adrenal gland is also composed of two distinct tissues, the outer cortex and the inner medulla, like we talked about a second ago. The adrenal cortex tends to be a little bit more fattier and more of a yellowish color. However, I didn't have yellow, so we just have to pretend. And then the adrenal medulla is more of a reddish brown color inside. So basically think of like a thick capsule that inside has all this connective tissue, or think of like connected sand inside of a capsule, or there's like little squishy balls that stick together inside a capsule. And this basically surrounds the entire adrenal gland. The outer part of the gland produces hormones that are very essential to our daily living of our everyday life, known as also cortisol hormone, that helps regulate our metabolism and helps our body respond to stressors in our life. And then aldosterone, which helps control our blood pressure, but it's also known as the silent killer. High blood pressure is. The adrenal medulla, in the middle here, makes chemicals such as epinephrine, or also we know this as adrenaline, and then norepinephrine. Norepinephrine helps with sending out nerve signals to our body, into our brain, and then back into the actual adrenal glands themselves. So they also make hormones that our body uses to make sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone. So when someone is lacking in that, unfortunately, they will have to be on medicine. Cortisol, aldosterone, adrenaline, and noradrenaline, or also norepinephrine, are all these hormones that the adrenal glands make for us. They do important jobs, like basically food that we intake is turned into money. Oh my gosh, I wish. And turned into energy, and it manages our blood sugar levels as well. So it's really important that we take care of that type of gland. And when we notice something off, we should get it checked. That's why we check blood levels. So moving on to our endocrine portion of the pancreas. The endocrine component makes up about 2% of the pancreas, which is represented by about 1 to 2 million pancreatic islets or Langerhans. They are dispersed throughout the exocrine component of the pancreas, and most of them being located in the tail region of the pancreas. So I highlighted in here red what the entire pancreas is. This is the duodenum right here. This is our gallbladder. And then the number 1 right here is the head of the pancreas. Number 5 here is going to be the pancreatic islets, or these little flower, little dots looking things, clusters. Number 3 here is going to be the pancreatic duct. And then number 4 right up top here is going to be the lobules of the pancreas. It lies transversely in the upper abdominal area between the duodenum, which is on the right of the pancreas, and the spleen, which is going to be on the left. I didn't draw the spleen though. It is elongated, a tapered organ as well that lies across the back of the belly, which it's behind the stomach. So imagine the stomach is right here. I remove the stomach. Here's the pancreas here. The endocrine glands in our pancreas release hormones that control our blood sugar, are also known as glucose. Which we all know is important when you're type 1 diabetic or type 2 diabetic. The hormones are known as insulin, which reduces high blood sugar levels, and glycogen, which increases low blood sugar levels. So when we have higher levels of blood sugar in our system, insulin will be released. And when we have low levels of blood sugar levels, glycogen is released. It's late. I'm so sorry. And somatostatin is a hormone that regulates a variety of our bodily functions, which is by hindering the release of other hormones, the gastrointestinal tract, and then it also produces rapid functions of cells as well. So the pancreas is very, very important. It's divided into an exocrine portion and the endocrine portion, so the islets and Langerhans, and then the exocrine portion. The endocrine pancreas controls blood sugar levels, or also blood glucose levels. It secretes polypeptide hormones, which are also known as insulin and glycogen. These hormones have basically opposite effects on the body. So one helps bring blood sugar up, and then one helps bring blood sugars down, because we need to be in that fun little happy medium, I think it's 70 and 100 or 68 and 100. I should have looked that up, but I want to believe it's somewhere in between there. But I mean, when it's low, glycogen will happen, and then when it is too high, insulin will be secreted. It will happen in our body. So when they have opposite actions, with insulin promoting glucose uptake and then utilized by tissue, and glycogen facilitates glycogenolysis and glycogenosis, it's really important that they function correctly, because when they don't, then we have to be put on medicine. Type 2 diabetic can usually be managed through diet and exercise, unless it's just really uncontrollable. Once you have that control of it, you can. It's actually fairly easy to live a life with being type 2 diabetic. Type 1 is where you're going to be insulin dependent, because your body does not produce the appropriate hormones that's needed to either bring your levels up or bring your levels down. So I just want to, go over, the reason why it's important. Our endocrine system is important because it basically controls everything that happens within our body. It controls growth and development throughout our childhood. It regulates our bodily functions when we become adults and don't know what we're doing half the time. And then it also helps with the reproductive process. So when we're wanting to have children or have offspring. The endocrine system is extremely important for control and other various regulations in major functions on how our body processes every day, which is basically, we can see this as also energy control throughout our entire body. So that to me is our endocrine system, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to week 2.